Citizen TV, this is The Explainer with Yvonne Okwara.
That's right, Njoki Shege is our sign language interpreter tonight. 2 police officers have each been sentenced to 35 years in jail for the murder of a man in their custody. Emmanuel Wafula and Hodwin Sirengo were found guilty by the Eldoret High Court of the torture and murder of Dennis Lusava in a police cell in 2020. The prosecution had lined up 21 witnesses in the case, detailing the harrowing details of torture in police cells that led to the death of the victim, who had initially been arrested for failure to wear a mask during the COVID-19 pandemic that marked the year. Laura Otieno reports on the landmark ruling that is shining a ray of hope on the quest for justice for victims of police brutality.
The 5-year quest for justice for family members of 31-year-old Dennis Lovasa was concluded on Tuesday when the Eldoret High Court sentenced 2 police officers to 35 years in jail each. Dennis, who was arrested on the 7th of October 2020 for failing to wear a face mask, disappeared from the Mbururu police post in Kakamega County and his body found later in River Nzoia. Referencing evidence fronted by the prosecution, the court found Emmanuel Wafula and Hodwin Sirengo to have grossly violated human rights, as a post-mortem report showed that the father of 2 had died from blunt force trauma.
Did we have the circumstance that this death could be avoided? The answer is yes. Our brothers had all what it takes to secure the life of the deceased in this matter. But unfortunately, that was never to be, and then we found ourselves in this litigation. All in all, I sentenced each accused person to 35 years imprisonment.
Delivering the sentence, Justice Nyakundi further made reference to the Bible, underscoring the right to life and the untimely death of 31-year-old Dennis Lovasa, with evidence showing he was handcuffed to a window and beaten to his death.
Every human being has to be allowed to number his days, or a days are right. And the numbering those days are right. For the one who gave breath, gave the first life to the first man, he said every human being has to number his days, or a days are right, to 70. My findings are that the aggravating factors in this matter outweigh any metrics of mitigation.
The family of the deceased expressed appreciation to the justice system, terming it a temporary relief to the gaping wound of not only losing their son, but the sole breadwinner of the family.
Nimeshukuru sana na wale wako saa hii masikari mwenye iko hapa, kama unajua tu na askari, chunga binadamu wenzako, baada kuchukua mwenzako unaua.
The decision by Justice Nyakundi today marks a landmark judgment in the fight against impunity that is perpetrated by members of the National Police Service.
The conviction of the 2 now casts a hope for justice for victims of police brutality, with tens of families having recorded statements with IPOA. Lusava's family received legal aid from the International Justice Mission in the case against the 2 officers. Emmanuel Wafula and Hodwin Sirengo were handed a 14-day window to appeal the court's decision. Laura Otieno, Citizen TV.
A photojournalist who captured the police officer accused of shooting protester Rex Masai has testified in court. He told the court how he trailed and documented police constable Isaiah Murangiri over 2 days, including on the 18th of June last year, despite Murangiri claiming that he was off duty. His photos, now key court evidence, show a man in plainclothes firing tear gas, arresting journalists and protesters, and wearing a bracelet bearing his name. Willie Lusige reports.
A critical witness has emerged in the case over Rex Masai's killing, a photojournalist who says he captured the officer in action before and on the day Rex was shot.
Just outside the Supreme Court.
The court heard that police constable Isaiah Ndumba Murangiri was trailed and photographed for 2 days from June 18th, despite Murangiri claiming he wasn't on duty.
I think I was not on duty.
You are not on duty, therefore there is no way you could have been armed.
Yes, Your Honor.
Testifying under protection from a secret location, the journalist said Murangiri was in plain clothes on 18th June, hurling tear gas and arresting journalists and protesters, prompting him to start documenting his actions.
The same side officer, I captured him as they were making arrests of some journalists who had been arrested as they were carrying out their duty.
The witness says his images place Murangiri at multiple protest scenes, visibly armed, challenging his off-duty claim.
As he was getting into the car, he shot tear gas to the direction where the journalists were.
The photos also reveal a distinct mark on the officer's face, which Murangiri also denies.
Touch towards, yes, just a little higher. Good. Just a little higher, there. Is there anything familiar on your face that you know as a mark on your face?
None, Your Honor.
On his left cheek, yes, below his ear, and he has a black spot, which appears near the kind of a birthmark.
The images also show a bracelet on his wrist inscribed with the name Aizo, a short form of Isaac.
And Aizo.
More witnesses are expected to testify on August 1st and 8th when the hearings resume. With 8 witnesses remaining to testify into the Rex murder inquest, the family is still hopeful that finally it will get justice. Willie Lusige, Citizen TV at the Milimani Law Courts in Nairobi.
The Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions is on the spot for failing to act on recommendations by the DCI to charge Kennedy Kalombotole as a prime suspect in the murder of Gilbert Kinyua Muthoni at the Kenyatta National Hospital that occurred on the night of the 6th of February 2025. It has emerged that the DCI had already concluded through a detailed investigation that Kalombotole was responsible for the murder and that a report was submitted to the ODPP on the 30th of June 2025. However, weeks went by without any arrest or prosecution until another murder was reported at the same hospital just 17 days after the report was released, raising serious concerns over prosecutorial inaction and a potentially preventable second death. Melito Letenges reports.
A chilling investigation report dated June 30th, 2025 has surfaced detailing how 40-year-old Gilbert Kinyua was murdered in his hospital bed on the night of February 6th. The report pieces together that fateful night through testimony from the nurse on duty, Sharon Chepchieng, as well as statements from the victim's family, hospital security, doctors and investigators. At the heart of the report is one conclusion, that Gilbert's roommate Kennedy Kalombotole should be charged with murder based on the weight of evidence, placing him at the center of the brutal killing. Although none of the 12 witness statements directly place the suspect at the moment of the murder, a key testimony came from nurse Sharon Chepchieng, who was on duty that night. She reported administering medication to both the deceased, Gilbert Kinyua, and his roommate Kennedy Kalombotole. But what followed was the chilling reality of murder at the country's top referral hospital. During the scene documentation conducted at the scene of crime, DCI investigators observed a trail of blood drops on the floor, extending from the deceased bed toward the adjacent bed occupied by Kennedy Kalombotole, who was the roommate of the deceased, Gilbert Kinyua Muthoni. Despite the DCI submitting its recommendations to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions on June 30th, no action was taken against the suspect. 17 days later, another murder was reported. The deceased Edward Mainge Ndegwa killed in the same fashion as Gilbert Kinyua, his throat slit in a manner that mirrored the earlier killing. The striking similarities raising chilling questions about a possible pattern and whether the second death could have been prevented. The Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions is on the spot for not acting on the report, which would have likely averted the second murder at KNH. Kalombo Tole has since been arraigned but declined to speak during his first appearance, despite police insisting he is mentally fit and verbally capable. The High Court has now ordered a mental assessment at Mbagathi Hospital. Until that is complete, Kalombo Tole will be held at Nairobi Remand Prison. Justice Kavedza further directed that he receive special diabetic care, including supervised insulin administration, and explicitly prohibited him from handling needles. Melita Oletenges, Citizen TV.
The Medihill Group of Hospitals has dismissed recommendations by the Investigative Committee on Tissue and Organ Transplant Services to investigate and prosecute its chairman, Dr. Swarup Mishra, and 3 others over alleged organ trafficking. The committee's report flagged possible falsified signatures and suspected coercion in kidney transplant procedures at the facility. Claims Dr. Mishra has dismissed as malicious and false. Gatete Njoroge reports.
A week after Health Cabinet Secretary Aden Duale received a damning report on organ trafficking, triggered by chilling testimonies from alleged victims in Eldoret,
there is no guideline for package.
the Medihill Group of Hospitals is fighting back. The facility, named in the findings as allegedly complicit in the illegal trade, has dismissed the committee's recommendations, which call for fresh investigations and the possible prosecution of its founder, Dr. Swarup Mishra, alongside 3 others.
Medihill is never involved in any selection of donor, is never involved in any sort of bribery or force to make donors commercialization.
This report does not in any way, it did not in any way find any organ transplant or kidney commercialization, as the report will have attempted to report.
Mishra and his lawyers poked holes in the findings that showed 38% of recipients had an unknown status, pointing to possible gaps in documentation or lack of identification documents in the patient record.
In terms of foreign patients, we had copies of passports without exception, plus affidavits. And so when they say they weren't able to find some details of some of the patients in terms of citizenship or gender, that's completely false.
Either the committee was lazy or they were malicious, because all the answers they needed were in that report. But unfortunately, then it appears they relied on hearsay, on innuendos, to build a report and make conclusions.
The former Keses MP says he is ready to face the law, even as the committee highlights possible interference, including tampering with identification documents, intimidation of whistleblowers, and delays in delivering justice for the complaints raised.
If Mishra and Medihill is really culprit, we carry the cross. And if we are innocent, in the name of God, please give us justice.
We are very aggrieved at the way the committee seems to have approached this thing with a premeditated mind.
The investigative committee has called for a probe into cash payment practices at Medihill Hospital and urged an investigation into KMPDC for possible regulatory failures. Gatete Njoroge, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
The National Police Service Commission and the National Police Service clashed today in Parliament, with the Chief Executive Officer of the Commission, Peter Lele, claiming that the Inspector General of Police, Douglas Kanja, had denied him access to the police payroll records. As Emmanuel Toh reports, it took intervention from the Public Accounts Committee to force the police to hand over the records, allowing the Commission to conduct an audit of police human resources.
Chair, the moment she hands over, you write back to the committee.
The rift between the National Police Service Commission and the National Police Service escalated on Tuesday as the frosty relations between the two entities took a dramatic turn. NPSC CEO Peter Lelei clashed with Inspector General Douglas Kanja over access to the integrated personnel and payroll database. The commission accuses the police of undermining its authority as the employer, while the IG remained firm, refusing to yield.
The National Police Service has submitted all personnel records requested by the Commission over the past 3 financial years in a timely and structured manner.
However, the IG's response was quickly rebutted by the Commission.
So have you submitted the payroll?
Yes. As the accounting officer for the police, any information relating to human resource in terms of recruitment, anything, Chair, we submit to the Commission.
CEO, yes. Are you able to access the payroll?
For the issues requested in this letter and this audit query, I have not been presented with the documents I asked.
The back and forth prompted members of the National Assembly's Public Accounts Committee to demand that the police respect their employer.
What is in this payroll that is hidden from the employer? What it means is that on oath, both Kanja and Banis are lying.
You know, the good thing with the truth is that you don't have to remember. Even if you are woken up from your sleep in the middle of the night, you don't have to be recruited, reminded, and what have you.
So we are asking a simple question. Where is the payroll? Who has the payroll? Because the employer must have the payroll and nobody else. Yeah. Can she answer us as that question?
That the National Police Service hands over. It's not to give access. There's a difference, by the way. There is a difference between access and being given.
The committee finally compelled the IG to hand over the documents, allowing the commission to conduct an audit of the police database.
We want you, especially the accounting officer, to hand over all the HR function, especially the payroll. You hand over. You don't give the commission the access, but you hand over.
We are open to that. They can be able to get it in text.
Emmanuel Tor, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
Tonight, Stephen Munyaho, the Kenyan man previously on death row in Saudi Arabia, is back in the country and reunited with his family. After 14 harrowing years on death row in Saudi Arabia, Stephen Munyaho has finally touched down in Nairobi Monday midday. His journey marked by an accidental death, a mother's tireless fight, and an incredible outpouring of generosity culminated in an emotional reunion. Brenda Wanga reports.
The weight of a family's 14 years long wait was almost palpable at the international arrivals at the JKIA. An anxious anticipation to reunite with their kin, whose very arrival back home has taken everything from this family. And so they waited with bated breath. And a joyous song to welcome home a man they had nearly lost hope of seeing, but one that they collectively fought so hard to bring home. 51-year-old Steve Munyaha Abdul Karim is finally home. For 14 agonizing years, this family and community have held on to hope and prayers that their son, facing death by beheading, would make it back home to them. Their relief at seeing him, touching him, and talking to him almost too much for some of them to bear.
I'm glad to be back home in Kenya. My presence here today is nothing short of a miracle. And I want to begin by thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the gift of life.
A miracle that has taken years, and his mother's unwavering love, faith, and fighting spirit. Dorothy Kweyu launched a campaign last year to help raise the 150 million shillings blood money that will see her son, facing the death sentence in a foreign land, saved from certain death and released.
We used all the capabilities of the state to try to mobilize resources towards the satisfaction of the demanded compensation. In the end, one of our pleas to the Muslim League was successful.
I remember that morning, and I'm so grateful. You opened your door, wiped away my tears, and promised that you would deliver my firstborn, the first fruit of my womb. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Allah, for this wonderful, wonderful gift of life. Thank you for each and everyone, and especially my media colleagues. Thank you.
Stephen's redemption came early this month when the Muslim League agreed to pay the money demanded by the aggrieved family. Stephen had been tried, convicted and sentenced to death by beheading for the manslaughter of his former colleague in Saudi Arabia.
Many are the times in our meeting sessions, in our planning sessions, that it looked like a lost cause. But prayer, faith, brotherhood, supporting each other, solidarity, has a way of working wonders.
I want also to thank everyone who prayed for me, encouraged me, and contributed towards my freedom and return home. Some of you, I know, but the vast majority, in your tens of thousands, was simply touched by my misfortune of a total stranger.
For now, the long overdue reunion between Steve-O and his family is a reality. He says he's going to rest, find his bearing, and find his place in his family and society at large. But most importantly, embrace the second chance at life that this release and return home now grants him. Brenda Wanga, Citizen TV.
The ODM party now says it is fully behind the broad-based government arrangement and called to order factions pulling in different directions. The party's Central Committee, chaired by Raila Odinga, resolved to have a technical working team to oversee the implementation of the 10-point agenda contained in the Memorandum of Understanding signed between the party and President William Ruto's UDA. Stephen Leto reports.
After prolonged internal party disagreements over which way on the broad-based government arrangement, the Orange Party's top decision-making organ has called factions to order. Party Secretary General Edwin Sifuna had last week stirred a storm within the party over the support of the broad-based government and MOU with President William Ruto's UDA. But after the Central Committee meeting held today and chaired by Raila Odinga, stated that a consensus was brokered.
That while members arrived here with different viewpoints on many issues within the party and the country, the committee has managed to broker an unbreakable unity of purpose in the party and a single-minded focus on ensuring that ODM continues to be a loyal servant of the people and the country.
In a tense meeting that ran from morning to afternoon, attended by, among others, the deputy party leaders Governor Abdul Samad Nasir and Senator Godfrey Osotsi, as well as party chairperson and Homa Bay Governor Gladys Wanga, agreed to fully back the MOU between the Orange Party and UDA.
That the party supports the position that has been taken by party leader Honorable Raila Odinga to work with the Kenya Kwanza administration to stabilize the country and create an enabling environment for Kenyans to address their concerns through democratic and constitutional means.
While in Kakamega County last week at the height of the confusion, Odinga told party delegates that ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna was among the team that drafted the MOU with UDA late last year to expedite implementation of the content, the meeting passing a resolution to have a technical team that will oversee the rollout of the now contentious 10-point agenda.
And this is now the position of the party. Yes. That we will be making sure that we put together a team that can ensure that we implement the MOU that we signed with UDA. As
Chungwa House prepares for the ODM at 20 Jamboree, it says it will continue calling for an intergenerational national conference to deliberate on issues affecting the country with a major focus on the youth agenda. Stephen Leto, Citizen TV.
Let's take our first break here on The Explainer tonight. Much more to come. We have some more news coming your way, including that interview on the state of law and order in the country. It's been quite the roller coaster over the last 2 years. The president of the Law Society of Kenya, Faith Odhiambo, is here with me to talk about that and more. Welcome back. We'll be speaking with the president of the Law Society of Kenya, Faith Odhiambo, in just a moment. But first, let's update you on some other news making headlines. The cabinet has approved the sale of the Kenya Pipeline Company in a move that will see the government reduce its shareholding in the company. Cabinet also approved the recommendations by the Presidential Task Force on Religious Organizations, which seeks to introduce sweeping changes that will see religious organizations register afresh in a self-regulating fashion. Emmanuel Tor reports.
The cabinet dispatch sent to newsrooms Tuesday evening highlighted several landmark decisions by the cabinet as government moves to effect several changes. Among the changes include the green light for the reinstatement of Kenya Pipeline Corporation KPC into the privatization program, which will see the multi-billion shilling corporation partially go into private hands. This will now see a certain percentage of KPC's shares listed at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. According to the cabinet documents, the privatization of KPC will enable the private sector and industry experts to drive growth, efficiency and innovation. KPC, a strategic player in Kenya's energy supply chain, has maintained a strong profitability record and holds significant asset value. However, the cabinet noted that the company has not yet reached its optimum performance and market value, largely due to bureaucratic constraints and public sector inefficiencies. Bringing in private capital and professional expertise, the government says is expected to inject new energy into the company, modernize operations and position KPC as a regional logistics and energy powerhouse. Besides the KPC, the Kenya Literature Bureau, Rivertex East Africa, the National Oil Corporation and the new Kenya Cooperatives Creameries are other entities set to undergo privatization in the near future. The privatization of the Kenyatta International Convention Center was blocked by the court, citing public interest of the entity, with the court saying no meaningful public participation was done before the move. Cabinet also approved the recommendations from the Presidential Task Force on Religious Organizations, which seeks to introduce several changes, including the fresh registration of all religious organizations in Kenya, establishment of a Religious Affairs Commission, and strengthening umbrella faith organizations for coordination. Emmanuel Tor, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
A family from Loitoktok in Kajiado County is in agony and pleading for the release of their 1-year-old son, who is being held at Abian Hospital in Isli. The child was referred to Kenyatta National Hospital, but the ambulance transferring the child from Kajiado diverted them to the private facility, ignoring clear instructions in the referral letter. Now the child is fighting for his life in ICU without parental care, as the hospital has barred the parents from seeing the child until they pay a bill of 3 million shillings. Mary Moki reports.
A mother's worst nightmare. Esther Ulavu sits in a dimly lit motel in Isli, her eyes swollen and voice trembling. What was supposed to be a routine corrective surgery turned into a medical nightmare. Her woes began when the operating surgeon first demanded for 5,000 for him to undertake the surgery.
Nikamwambia daktari, mimi nimetafuta hiyo 5K sijapata, nitafanya aje na siku imefika. Akanambia kama hujapata mtoto hatafanyiwa mpaka upate.
The operating surgeon admits asking for money, saying the request is a normal one.
That was for the catheter. I think we talked with the mother.
Esther says her baby was overdosed with anesthesia and his heart stopped twice. The doctors admitted his brain lacked oxygen for several minutes and he slipped into a coma. The hospital recommended an urgent transfer to Kenyatta National Hospital, and that's when another demand came. She was required to pay 50,000 shillings to initiate the referral. Time was ticking. The baby was in critical condition. Still, no ambulance would leave until she paid.
Mtoto anapelekwa referral Kenyatta, natafuta inatakiwa 50,000. Utafuta 50,000 ndio mtoto apelekwe. Nikaambia 50,000 naitoa wapi? Tafuta mama maana mtoto anachoka.
She borrowed the money thinking her child would finally get the help he needed. But when the ambulance stopped, they weren't at the Kenyatta National Hospital.
Tunafika tunaambiwa tushuke, tumeshafika. Kushuka kuangalia, nauliza kwani hapa ndio Kenyatta? Dereva ambulance akasema mimi hapa ndio nimeambiwa. Au nasi wakasema hapa ndio tuliambiwa.
The ambulance had taken them to Abian Hospital in Eastleigh, a small private dispensary never mentioned in the referral. And that's where the second nightmare began. Here, Esther says she's been barred from seeing her son, assaulted, insulted, and left without updates. Video evidence seen by Citizen TV shows a hospital administrator assaulting Esther after her husband was beaten for asking to see the child. Desperate, the family is now pleading for the Ministry of Health to intervene and transfer the baby to Kenyatta. We contacted the medical superintendent at Loitoktok Hospital, Ezekiel Kapkoni, who says the hospital bears no responsibility for where the ambulance driver took Esther and her baby. We sought to find out from Abian Hospital why they received a patient whose referral letter clearly stated he ought to have been taken to KNH. The hospital CEO, only identified as Abdullah, said they were duly credited and advised us to take further questions to the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Council. Meanwhile, the baby remains locked away, his parents at times barred from seeing him, and a 3 million shilling price tag hangs over his fragile life. Mary Moki, Citizen TV.
The M-Pesa Sokoni caravan continued to tour Kisii and Nyamira counties as Safaricom, in partnership with Royal Media Services, brings the 18th M-Pesa anniversary celebrations right to the customers' doorsteps. Radio Citizen and Egesa FM presenters are on the ground with M-Pesa Sokoni.
Presenters from Egesa FM and Radio Citizen joined residents of Kisii and Nyamira in the vibrant M-Pesa Sokoni celebrations, which continue across the country. Today, the caravan made stopovers in Kisii town, Keroka, Ikonge and Nyamira, giving residents an opportunity to learn more about M-Pesa services and innovations.
CD Money Market, *334.
We are really happy with the partnership with Citizen TV. We've been able to really bring our customers together and celebrate what we have been doing the last 18 years. And what have we been doing? We've been giving payment solutions to our merchants so that they can actually build their businesses. Another thing we've done, our merchants today can actually access credit to be able to build stock, to be able to build their businesses.
We have gotten an opportunity to interact with them, at the same time also to get a lot of things they were winning from Safaricom. Safaricom was giving a number of goodies, and we really enjoyed meeting our listeners, at the same time also getting the gifts that Safaricom had.
Safaricom prides itself on its expansive grassroots presence with more than 1,000 outlets across Kenya serving customers.
That shop serves end-to-end services from Safaricom. There's no way mtu anaenda mbali kutafuta services. Hii duka tumefungua hapa kwa CVD kuwasaidia wananchi. Una replace line, unafanywa liba na M-Pesa for merchant business. Tunafanya devices pale, simu yoyote. Tunahamisha watu kutoka ile mulika mwizi, tunaleta kitu inaitwa tunikiwa.
In Kisumu, Safaricom engaged farmers and business owners from the Nyanza region on leveraging technology to grow and sustain their enterprises.
Ninafurahia Safaricom kunialika hapa mambo leo kufundisha wakulima mambo ya ukulima wa kahawa na mambo ya payment ya wakulima wa kahawa.
We brought our own team from DigiFarm to help them understand
how they can incorporate technology and AI in digital farming.
Tomorrow, the M-Pesa Sokoni caravan will tour Vihiga, Kakamega and Bungoma counties. Steve Shitera, Citizen TV, Nyamira.
Tower Market in Boni, Makueni County on Tuesday came to a standstill as Musi FM, the leading radio station in the Ukambani region under Royal Media Services stable, treated its listeners to a day full of thrilling fun, courtesy of Joy Millers. The listeners who engaged in various cooking competitions using the manufacturer's premium brands, Raha Premium Kavagara and Joy Max Mwivoko, also had the opportunity to meet their favorite radio presenters in the caravan that saw the station host its morning show at the market. Musi FM's head of radio, Christine Ndanu, while lauding the region's support for the last 20 years of the station's existence, reiterated its commitment to continue programming that is innovative, informative and educative.
Piko na Raha Premium, nimefurahi sana. Muendelee hivyo hivyo na mutulete tena na tena.
Na watu wamekubali, watu wameonja chapati, wameonja ugali na wamekubali ya kwamba unga nambari moja hapa nchini ni unga wa Raha Kavagara.
Mashabiki wetu tunawashukuru sana kwa kujitokeza kwa wingi na pia kwa kutushika mkono. Kwanza hivi sasa tunasherehekea miaka 20 ya utangazaji. Tunashukuru sana na tunaomba wazidi kusikiza Musi FM.
All right, so here on The Explainer, like we promised you, we're here with Madam President Faith Odhiambo, President of the Law Society of Kenya, to speak about the state of law and order in the country. And we invite you to give us your comments. The hashtag is The Explainer at Citizen TV Kenya. If you'd like to send us a text message, the number is 22422. Madam President, thank you for being with us on The Explainer tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin with latest events. We thought maybe there was a slowdown in the abductions. We've heard assurances from the state and government. And just when we thought things were over or slowing down, then we saw the abduction of activist and businessman Mwabili Magodi in Tanzania again, and his release about 4 or 5 days later. Well, what's your reaction to this latest incident?
So first of all, let me just say thank you to all the advocates for their commitment to working together, and even in the East African region, us coming together in terms of challenges like this. So first of all, it's quite appalling and surprising, and also it reads into a very scary scenario that we're seeing in the region. It's like there's a tacit agreement in terms of the region of what is happening. People can walk in and walk out and pick up individuals, though he says that he was originally picked by the Tanzanian government and later on handed over to the Kenyan government, where he said he went through a more horrifying situation in terms of all his items were taken away when you crossed the border. And he was he got some beating, or would say some sort of torture was meted upon him. And even at a time that as a nation, we are hearing calls for, things to calm down and us to reevaluate and look at what's the way forward as a nation and as a country. It's quite sad to see that we're escalating even now across the border, that you're never safe. Yeah. Wherever you go, it seems like in the region, that we can't be assured of the safety of Kenyans or our neighbors, so to speak. Because today, when you saw the case of Besigye, he's filed a case in Kenya through his advocate, seeking for certain constitutional declarations and compensation from Kenya. And so it's, it gets to a space that we have to agree as a nation where people will be able to express themselves. If we say the streets are not safe, people should not go to the streets, then where do you expect Kenyans to be able to articulate, to share, to be able to raise their concerns, and how will you expect them to engage with the government of the day? Because we demand that abductions must come to an end in our country. We are coming to a stage in our constitution that we should be getting some level of maturity as a nation and a country. But we're seeing a lot of pushbacks that in the Constitution 2010, we're still seeing abductions. And the problem now of the nature that it's taking is you don't know who will you hold accountable. Are you saying that because he says he feels the moment he crossed the border and he was handed over is when things even got worse. And so because even there was no stamping of his passport and eventually everything was taken away, so you cannot say where was he actually. Was he in Tanzania? Was he in Kenya where he got tortured? And how are we moving forward? Yeah. So as a country, I think there needs to be a lot of rethought and reset in terms of how our government wants to work with its people, because this is unsustainable. And it will create a situation where people are like a brewing pot waiting to explode. Because if you confine people and push people to the wall, that there's no way of them expressing, reaching out to you and talking to you, then you're only creating a recipe for disaster.
And we will talk a little bit more about, what happened in Tanzania with others as well. All of this has happened in just a short amount of time. And indeed, who we hold accountable and how we go about doing that. But I just want to sort of establish something else that's happening in the country. And you will have seen, we're witnessing acts of what some would term repression by the police. So several times now, they've stopped opposition leaders, government critics from having their meetings, including just this last Sunday when there was opposition leaders who were attempting to have a rally and, they were stopped from doing that. Isn't this in itself not a threat to law and order and the principles of rule of law? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, it's funny that if you look at Article 243 and 244, which outlines the role of the National Police Service, it should be apolitical and uphold the highest standards of professionalism and including human rights standards as they do their work. Well, and yet we're seeing what we'd ordinarily see in a repressive system of government, where the police will determine whether you want to assemble or not, yet the plain requirement is that you give a notification that you want to meet at this place at this time. And in actual sense, they ought to be providing security, because if they feel that their security concerns, they either notify them why they cannot have or deploy, ensuring that there's security around that area in the event that they want to host and have, because an apolitical National Police Service should not be saying these ones can host rallies and others can't, because we continue to see government, cabinet secretaries, the president and his team moving around the country and hosting, and we are seeing a lot of the empowerment that is going around the country. So if they can hold rallies, why can't the opposition hold rallies? And so it's a situation where the law should be applied equally to all parties. So if the police feel that there could be violence, let them ensure that they properly deploy and ensure that the police are there to ensure the safety of all citizens who want to engage and listen to what only the government has to say, but also what the opposition has to say.
And, in that incident, and I think we're showing some of the footage on your screens, opposition politicians claiming the police service is now getting sucked into partisan politics, and you've just talked about them being apolitical. MP Munyaka alleges that they made him shout the two-term slogan, translating to either pro-government slogan or a pronouncement. Your thoughts on how the police are conducting themselves with respect to that?
Well, we've continuously called out the National Police Service, starting from their head in terms of their role and what they ought to do. And I think it's high time that even apart from holding command responsibility, that we start holding individual police officers accountable, because he's there as an individual. And so when he's violating the Constitution and also the police standing orders, I think the onus is now to hold them personally accountable. That's when it rings home that you are accountable to the rule of law and you must respect the decisions as is. And so unless we start seeing that, and I dare say that when we saw the case of abductions, that we had Justice Mugambi summoning then the acting IG, Masengeli, to court. And after ignoring seven demands for him to appear in court summons, the court gave custodial orders against him, which had not been done in quite a long time. And that forced him to come to court and apologize to the court. That's when it hit home that the courts actually have power.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's high time that we start holding individual police officers accountable, and that the courts exercise judicial courage to issue certain stern orders, so that we see now more police being adherent to the rule of law.
Yeah. My final question before we take a break. Explain to us in the law, would there be any circumstances under the law that would allow the police to block an opposition gathering, you know, as we saw on Sunday and previously, to block protests? Because now you're the legal mind, so help us understand, would there be instances where the police would, by law, be allowed or forced to block a gathering of the public?
Well, I don't want to anticipate what the police would have been thinking, but I would say that unless they have credible evidence or information that there's violence or there's a possible riot or there's going to be destruction of property, which I'd say those will be a lot of conjectures on their part, is when they can say that they're stopping a possible gathering, or they could be at an attack on that particular area and they're trying to safeguard the safety.
Yeah.
But, you know, if notice was given in terms of they were informed there's going to be a gathering, I don't see any reason or excuse they ought to be giving, because the role of the police is to provide security and ensure security is upheld. So why not, instead of these games that we're seeing, ensure that you deploy, raise concerns to them in terms of what they think, if any particular area is a hotspot, have a discussion with those leaders, so that at the end of the day, the police have done their part. They've ensured they've tried to secure. But this element of trying to enforce and showing force that you're blocking opposition leaders, it shows a tangent that you have already decided that you're siding with a certain political rhetoric, which the whole aim of making the National Police Service independent was to pull it away from what it was known during the Moi era, that the police were appendage of the executive. And sadly, this is what we are seeing.
Let's take a break. We have much to talk about with you, including the role of IPOA, what's happening in the country, and that use of terrorism or anti-terrorism charges on protests. We know you issued a strong statement recently. We'll be talking a lot more about that and where we go from here. Stay with us here as we speak to the president of the Law Society of Kenya, Faith Odhiambo, here on The Explainer. We're taking a break. We will be back with more with her here on the program. Curbing cartel behavior. Competition Tribunal upholds fines against Devki, Tononoka and others over price-fixing scandal. We will be back with the president of the Law Society of Kenya in a minute, but first, tonight's business news. Now, let's take a look at what's happening with the Competition Tribunal that has affirmed fines against 5 steel manufacturers, including Devki Steel and Tononoka Rolling Mills, for cartel behavior. These companies were found guilty of colluding to fix prices and restrict the supply of steel products, significantly increasing the cost of construction for homes and infrastructure throughout the country. This decision concludes a multi-year investigation by the Competition Authority of Kenya into anti-competitive practices within the sector. The firms were among 14 initially implicated for price fixing and limiting imports of essential steel products, leading to inflated prices for materials such as bars, beams and pipes. Jasmine Wamboi now brings us the story.
The case dates back to 2021 when steel prices began rising sharply in patterns that could not be explained by normal market forces. Alarmed by the price fluctuations, the Competition Authority of Kenya launched investigations into 14 manufacturers. The authority conducted search and seizure operations during which they confiscated both physical and electronic evidence from company offices and executives' homes. The probe revealed widespread cartel conduct, including price fixing and output restrictions intended to manipulate supply and inflate prices. When presented with preliminary findings, 5 firms opted for early settlement. The remaining 9 were subjected to forensic analysis, uncovering emails and WhatsApp conversations that exposed detailed coordination between the companies. The conversations showed executives agreeing on price adjustments, timing of hikes, and import limitations for key products such as coils used in roofing and fabrication of windows and doors. At the close of the investigation in 2023, the authority fined the 9 companies a combined total of about 339 million shillings for their role in artificially inflating construction material prices. Under the law, the authority can impose fines of up to 10% of a company's annual turnover. Among those penalized were Tononoka Rolling Mills at 62.7 million shillings, Devki Steel Mills at 46.2 million, and Blue Nile Wire Products at 9.1 million shillings. Displeased with the decision and the penalties, the manufacturers moved to the Competition Tribunal. On July 9th this year, the tribunal upheld the authority's decision for 5 of the manufacturers. The 5 now have 30 days from the day of ruling to appeal the decision at the High Court. The steel industry, an economic powerhouse valued at over 100 billion shillings every year, has historically enjoyed government support. This includes tax incentives on imported machinery and even preferential treatment on public infrastructure projects. The point of these measures is to spur expansion in the sector and in turn generate employment. However, the cartel-like behavior of players in the sector has jeopardized these efforts. Jasmine Wambui, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
The failure by Uwezo Funds Management to respond to key audit queries raised by the Office of the Auditor General may consequently lead to the collapsing of several funds into one. According to the National Assembly Special Fund Committee Chairperson Fatuma Zainab, there is a need to restructure these funds into one so that they can collectively work on recovery and reduce risk exposure. And as Jimmy Mbogo now reports, up to 3/4 of the funds disbursed are not repaid.
The expenditure of Uwezo Fund in the financial year 2022-2023 and 2023-2024 is now being put into question. According to the Office of the Auditor General, the fund has only managed to satisfy 3 out of 10 audit queries raised in the period, an issue that has prompted the intervention of the National Assembly Special Fund Committee. Citizen TV has learned that in 2022-2023 financial year, the fund had an outstanding receivable of over 4 billion shillings. In the same period, the fund's budgetary control and performance was also put under scrutiny, with the auditors finding that there was a 193 million shillings under expenditure and questioning why the fund has only 20 staff members, mostly seconded from the State Department instead of 70. In the 2023-2024 financial year, the auditors further raised questions concerning the lack of provision for bad debt, which rose to over 5 billion shillings. At the same time, the lack of distinction between recurrent and non-recurrent receivable was also flagged. The auditors were further concerned with the fund's financial performance after it reported a 74 million shillings deficit, as well as an overutilization of expenditure by 58 million shillings.
We are losing a lot of money because the structures are not put in a way that the person, the institution giving the money is able to follow the money back. Because if a loan is given to a group of people, it's just by their ID and telephone contacts. And after that, they don't know where to follow the people. And so it becomes very difficult for the institution to follow up. So we are having so many unpaid debts, and we are not sure whether we should write them off and what reason will we have for writing them off.
The committee is now mulling the collapse and consolidation of key funds into one to enhance efficiency. It was also noted that 3/4 of the Uwezo funds are not repaid, a scenario replicated in the Women Enterprise Fund and the Youth Fund.
So it's difficult to follow. We need to restructure these funds and probably make them one fund so that they can collectively work together and find a way of following. Otherwise, we are losing a lot of money. The intention of the government was good, but the intention of the person borrowing the money is not good. They don't pay.
Uwezo Fund has been given 14 working days to respond to the committee and the Auditor General's questions before the next course of action is taken. Jimmy Mbogo, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
A lack of information and public awareness is significantly undermining efforts to achieve food security across the African continent. This was the key message from agricultural experts during a media briefing held ahead of the upcoming Africa International Agricultural Expo set for October this year. Stakeholders emphasized that many farmers, particularly smallholders, are not adequately informed about modern farming practices, climate-smart technologies and market access strategies that could transform their yield and livelihood. The expo is set to attract between 150 to 200 exhibiting companies and over 10,000 local and international visitors.
One of the major challenges, in addition to the backward technology, is fragmented information and lack of proper systems for information dissemination. So we think and we do believe that through this initiative of the 2025 Africa International Agricultural Expo, key players are going to come together to forge solutions that are going to solve the challenges and problems that are facing agriculture sector in our region.
We expect on that discussion and that engagement to see more innovative ways of producing food. We expect on that discussion to see our women and youth are engaged. How African can use the current technologies in the market to enhance their food productivity.
Business News, brought to you by Definite Assurance. We've got you covered. Fast claims settlement, PSV, private and commercial vehicle insurance. Visit definiteassurance.com. Definite Assurance. You are definitely covered. Uko nao.
Sports News, brought to you by... Back your favorite team as they battle for glory in the Total Energies CAF African Nations Championship 2024, right here on home soil.
Defending champions Highway Secondary School started their title defense on the wrong footing with a 3-1 defeat to new football powerhouse St. Joseph's Kitale from Rift Valley. This was in the opening match of Group B at the Kakamega High School. Collins Molati opened the scoring for the winners through a penalty kick in the first half for a 1-0 lead at the halftime break. Dangerman Instance Simiu scored a brace for St. Joseph's in the second half, while Rashid Mandi scored a consolation goal for the champions. In other results, Kirangari from Central blanked Serani from Coast 2-0. Wasingu Scorpions from Western hammered Mbiruri from Eastern 5-1, while Agai from Nyanza thrashed Garissa 8-1. The national women volleyball team, Malkia Strikers, will leave for Thailand on the 15th of August for the 2025 FIVB World Championship. After nearly 3 weeks of training, the squad has been trimmed from 29 players to 20, with 6 more to be dropped ahead of departure. New head coach Jeffrey Omondi has decried the poor training conditions but says the team is in high spirits. The coach is working on 3 key areas: service, defense in the front and backcourts, as well as setting. With no injuries in the team, the technical bench is now assessing each position and the needs in the team before picking the final squad. Only 14 players will travel to Thailand, where Kenya is placed in a tough Group G, together with powerhouses Poland, Germany and Vietnam. On Chan 101 tonight, we look at the men and women at the center of the pitch, those who make crucial decisions during the match. The match officials are already in the country, so just who is representing East Africa? Mike Okinyi with the details.
Well, on Chan 101 today, we look at the match officials that we'll have for the Chan tournament in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. What do we have? When you look at our wall here, we've got all the match officials, 70 match officials from across Africa. Those are 26 referees. We've got 26 assistant referees and 18 video match officials, also known as the VAR officials. Remember, all these matches, 44 of them, will be under VAR scrutiny. The VAR officials will be telling the referees on the pitch if there's any incident that they need to review. And remember, all these 70 match officials are coming from 30 CAF member associations or 30 countries across Africa. So who are the referees that we have and where are they coming from? When you look at the referees, these are the referees from East Africa. We only have 4 of them, and that is Dickens Mimisa from Kenya, FIFA referee, Ahmed Arajiga, FIFA accredited referee from Tanzania, and Razake Kasaliriwe from Uganda, also a FIFA accredited referee. Shamira Nabanda, we'll look at her in the next slide and see why she's important in this list. So the assistant referees that we have, and remember we are looking at the assistant referees from the East African countries of Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Samuel Kuria from Kenya, Ronald Katenya from Uganda, and Ali Hamdani Said from Tanzania. So those are the match officials as the assistant referees. The VAR officials, who are very important. When you look at the VAR officials, there's only one video assistant referee or video match official, Stephen Yembe. Remember, Kenya has produced very, very good VAR officials. Professor Kamaku, he was the first one, did very well at the AFCON tournament. And now we've got Stephen Yembe, who will be on the video assistant referee or VAR room. So match officials on the women's side, we've got Buchra Karbubi from Morocco and Shamira Nabanda from Uganda. These two have proven to be very, very good referees, both on the men and the women matches, and CAF decided these two must come and officiate at the Chan tournament. So on the assistant referees as well, we've got women there, and this is Diana Chikotesha from Zambia and Azebong Fomo Karin from Cameroon. Those are the assistant referees on the women's side. Remember, they're already here. They've gone through some training, they've gone through orientation, and they're ready to take us through the 44 matches that will be